Swarmlings are a crazy faction. So the most notable thing about them is that all their structures are really expensive. They all cost more than a typical faction structures would cost. Also, and offsetting that a little bit is that they have base 2 worker income as opposed to all the other factions. Most of the other factions have only 1 base income. Okay, what else is really notable? This stronghold is insane. You get 4 power income every round, and you get a special action that you can do once per round, including the round you build it in, where you get to, without having to pay 3 workers and 4 coins, you get to turn a dwelling into a trading post. So that's giving you, it's saving you 3 workers and 4 coins basically every round, including the round it's built in. So this stronghold is essential for Swarmlings. It's really, really good. Their structures are so expensive that getting that free upgrade it's just really valuable. So you essentially, especially as a beginner, just always open Stronghold as Swarmlings. So a couple other things that are notable. They start with 1 step on each of the cults, so they can play cults very flexibly. It doesn't really matter which rewards are when. They can probably find a way to dig into it a bit. They start with more resources, but that's because everything is more expensive for them. So that offsets a bit there. Other things are they have 9 power in Bull 2, so they can be a double dig faction. It's not as critical for them as it is for factions like, halflings, mermaids, engineers. But it can be a nice option for them, particularly if it's like town scoring round 2. Then you want to get those digs rolling. The last thing that's pretty neat about them is that when they town, they get 3 workers back. So that means, and so what you want is towning early is nice for them. They can do it easily because they're getting tall quickly. They're going stronghold and then they're getting free training posts. And that towning gives them workers back that basically infuses them with that. It helps them keep that momentum going. So it's like an economic boost every time you town. The last thing I just want to highlight that's interesting is all their structures are more expensive, but their tech upgrades, so the cost of digging and shipping is not more expensive. And so if you think about it, like relative to building buildings, increasing digs and increasing shipping are actually, they're comparatively cheap. And so that's something to think about with respect to Swarmlings, particularly from a scoring with those perspective. So the reason I sometimes am saying that Swarmlings can be isolationist is because they have their stronghold action that lets them upgrade any dwelling to a trading post without having to pay for it. And what that means is they don't need to be doing those trading post upgrades adjacent to other people, right? Where everyone else is trying to do that so that their trading posts are less expensive. Swarmlings have that action, so they can be upgrading trading posts away from everyone else. And so that's going to have consequences for how they think about their starting placements. They only actually need 1 of their structures to really be adjacent to an opponent, so that first trading post is a cheap one, but then you're going to turn it to a stronghold, and from there on, almost all of your trading posts are going to be free. So let's look at starting placements like D2 is probably the most common starting placement for Swarmlings, and that is a case where if yellow's on D3, D2 can be our place where we have our neighbor. And now if we have our neighbor there, we have a lot of options. Let me give you an example of an isolationist sort of starting placement combination, which would be H2. So now we're upgrading on D2 and then strongholding there. And then we might even just start upgrading our free trading posts in the south. And the game plan like this would look, where we're towning there and maybe towning in the south. So that's like a very isolationist. And, we have the option of actually connecting via H2 from these starting placements. However, this H2 placement is good in the sense that we're safe, we're away from everyone else, and we're getting our 2 towns comfortably. Maybe we're able to get a north thing here too. Maybe we can connect, which is kind of neat, so maybe there's some chance we could get some network points. However, we're not in anybody's way. we're not giving people power, which is good. We generate a lot of power ourselves with our strongholds, so maybe that helps us, but we're really not blocking anything. So a popular pair of starting placements now is D2 with G6. G6 looks weird, right? Like D2, G6, so far apart, you can't connect. Well, Swarmlings are usually not fighting for network anyway. In G6, you can see actually there's some nice options for town here, right? Like we could snag G5. We could be double digging H7 to get to I10, or we could be double digging F7 to get to E11. So you can see like how you can carve out an east town relatively easily, and it has the benefit of being annoying. You're sort of in the way when you're on G6. So first of all, if green wanted to town coming down through the east, you're sort of blocking that and making it difficult. If brown is starting on F5, you're threatening G5 if they don't grab it right away. Or if they even, if they're on dig scroll taking G5, you might be on a power scroll and double digging H7 and taking that from them, right? Like you can see how you've made them very uncomfortable in the east. And in the same way, you might pressure a black faction on E10 or something like that. Coming up this way. So you can see how G6 makes a lot of people uncomfortable, right? It just makes life difficult for them. And so as long as you get your two towns, you're not worried about network, and you just sort of, you can see the game plan, right? Play cults hard. We'll come back to that. But you see how D2 and G6 maybe feels riskier than H2 in the sense that like other people could take the hexes you need. On the other hand, if you're being proactive in the east, you can usually secure your town territory and be in the way of others. H2 has a nice benefit of being more likely to connect, so if there's some off chance of being able to get network points, that could be interesting. So I don't like to overly stress myself. So if it feels like G6 is going to force me to do actions quickly where there's actually other really good things I'd like to be doing, then I'll go H2 sometimes just to not force myself to, I'd rather be doing things with priests than trying to take power scrolls to dig hexes before other people. So then I might go H2. Let me tell you one that probably seems tempting, and I'm going to try to talk you out of it, recognizing that occasionally it's fine. And that's D5. D5 used to be very popular for Swarmlings because you're sort of in the middle of the boards. Mermaids always start on that hex, and so it feels natural. The issue with D5 is that you really want like C4, for example. And if you lose C4, now you really want to get to B3 through C3 because you need 3 hexes here somehow. And you, unlike mermaids, don't start with a shipping. So now all of a sudden, you're at very high risk of stranding the structure if you're not able to secure C4. If you're on dig scroll and you're like bridging to C4 and digging it right away, okay, maybe that will work fine. Or if there's just no pressure on those hexes on C4, C3, then like D5 can be fine. But to the extent that like you're playing against a green faction that's going to start on C4 anyway and then pressure you on C3, or even if it's like alchemists who might start on E5 and race up to B3 and they may even be starting on B5, like all of a sudden this looks pretty uncomfortable. You're sort of like starting to cut it close. And so again, you don't want to put yourself on D5 and then feel all this pressure to have to do things quickly when there might be better actions available. So in general, I don't think you're annoying as many other. So there's not blocking many other people here, perhaps with the exception of if green were trying to cut up through. And if there's no gray faction, by being on D5, perhaps you're preventing a witches or Oran town coming through there. That might be a reason to be on D5. But at the same time, if they're going to be C4, F4, now D5 might just seem really inefficient to you because you're going to be being pressured on these sides. So you wouldn't want to do that if you think Oran witches are going to be on C4. But if Oran witches are going to be on E9 and F4, then maybe you can start D5 and sort of block that area for them and then, grab this territory quickly enough. Maybe you're going to start on temporary shipping and plan to dig c4 and c3 immediately, right? Like that's an example where like, okay, I see the d5 game plan, that's okay. But in general, it puts a lot of pressure on you in your early actions. One last consideration, h4. H4 is kind of a sneaky cool Swarmlings starting placement. So let's say you're D2 and H4. There's some chance of connecting via 3-ship later, first of all, which is kind of neat. And second of all, you can grab territory here in the south. And the great feature of H4 is that it blocks the southern connection options. So imagine you're playing against Brown and they're E6, F5, and they'd like to connect south. Well, if you just start H4, now all of a sudden there's all this, blockage in this area. And what you're telling everyone else is, if you want to connect, you're all going to have to fight each other to connect through the north. And I'm going to stay out of that as Swarmlings, but all these other factions are now fighting each other and putting pressure on themselves to get to hexes and take actions that they might not otherwise want to take. And it's not like a direct aggression. It's sort of being indirectly aggressive by just putting yourself in a spot that's going to put pressure on other factions. So H4 there are definitely times where H4 is a very interesting starting placement as well. So probably mostly consider D2, G6. D2, H2 if you just want to kind of do your own thing off to the side. And then consider mixing in an H4 and every once in a while a D5. That's how I'd probably think about it. Okay, you have to open Stronghold as Swarmlings. Just put them in your head as a Stronghold faction. You have to open Stronghold. It's really good. Their structures are so expensive that being able to do a trading post for free is really, really valuable. You have to open Stronghold. A couple other things, they really like starting on dig scroll because they need at least one dig between the first 2 rounds, because you need a structure to upgrade for free in round 1, and then you need a structure to upgrade for free in round 2. So you just have to make sure you have at least one dig somewhere there. Of course, they love the big building scroll because they're gonna, they're gonna build their stronghold for sure round 1. They also really like the priest. They start with a step on all the cults, and so they're often looking to play the cults in round 1. I think, regarding what else they're going to do, they can, because they have 9 power in Bolt 2, they can definitely, often be double digging around 1 and getting some dwellings down. So I think that's totally fine, especially if it's like dig points round 1 or dwellings round 1. Feel free to go for double dig and be putting down a couple dwellings. Another option is to, temple round 1. And usually the standard way I'm kind of pushing you to play here for Swarmlings is to be really point greedy, right? And so usually if you're going to temple round 1, usually it's either Earth 1 or Water 1. Those are probably Earth 1 in a typical small footprint Swarmlings plan is not great for you unless you think you're going to go for the 3rd town. But at least taking it is being point greedy, and it takes it away from one of the other players. And so if you think you're going to get, Water 1 anyway, and then still maybe even take Air 1 at some point, you can grab Earth 1 if you want. The other thing I just want to throw out there that Claybo has here is super strong is their Sanctuary is really good because it produces 2 priests, where almost everybody else's Sanctuary produces only 1. And so the way to get your Sanctuary up round 1 is big building scroll, workers power action, coin action. If you can get that, you can actually open Stronghold Sanctuary, and that's just an awesome opening. And in general, you want to get your Sanctuary up early as Swarmlings. So one of the things that we're thinking as Swarmlings is man, all these buildings I need to build are so expensive, more expensive than for everyone else. That seems like a bummer. So it seems like the ideal way to play Swarmlings would be to try to win without building many structures. Now that sounds crazy. That's sort of opposite of how Terra Mystica works. You sort of score by building things, but it turns out that actually it can work, and it can work particularly well for Swarmlings. So you don't have to play it this way, but I think this is the way that you should try play Swarmlings at first, and we'll come back to other ways to play Swarmlings more expansively. But what I mean by that is, so let's say we are on D2, that's really bad X, and G6. And so early in the game, what are we trying to do? We're trying to town pretty quickly. So let's say we're trying to do this west town, and then maybe we grab G5, or maybe we just double dig one of H7, F7, and that is actually enough potentially, right? So we could do a 3-hex town in the east, and we could do a 4-hex town in the west. And we could spend the rest of the game just trying to get onto the big building scoring scroll, because we're going to build our sanctuary, our stronghold round 1 and our sanctuary pretty early. We also have a lot of trading posts up, so we particularly in the mid game, so we can try to jump onto the trading post scroll. We're going to try to feed our priest to cult. And one of the things that we're going to try to do in this game plan is that we're going to try to town early, which also gets us that 3-worker boost. And we're going to try to grab the 2-key town, which will help us get 2 steps on each of the cults and will help us sort of try to dominate the cults. Because part of our game plan here is to try to get as many cult points as possible and as many pass scroll points as possible. So with our second town, we might take the 8-point town, which gives you 1 step on each of the cults, and otherwise we're putting our, feeding our priests into cult. We're trying to get on pass scrolls we like, and then eventually we're increasing our digs and shipping for points. You might stop there. Maybe at some point you're templing for Air 1. But the next sort of thing to think about in this game plan is, can you find a place to do a 3rd town? So maybe you can figure out, okay, I can actually get to the north, or maybe I can actually, somehow squeeze out a town in the south, or, find another, maybe in the southwest. So sometimes you can figure out, okay, I can actually find a way to get a 3rd town here and, push up to like 11 structures, for example. And if you can do that, that's good. That's probably better. But you can also stay at pretty small footprint with Swarmlings and be okay. And if you want to sort of deeper dive on that, check out Zoras's sort of multi-hour Swarmlings guide on this. And then, yeah, I think actually that I'll leave it there for beginners. Just sort of think about that kind of game plan of like, try to get 2 towns, look for an opportunity for 3rd town, and otherwise be fighting the cults really hard. Swarmlings are a strong faction. Maybe not the strongest of the strong, but they're very, very good, and they're very resilient. Once they get going, they're really hard to disrupt. There's 2 big things for Swarmlings that are swing factors to them. The first is the pass scrolls. They really want to see big building pass scroll, trading post pass scroll, and ship scoring pass scroll in the game. They really want to see those because they're going to be building their stronghold round 1. They get the free trading post increase, and they need to figure out how to score on the pass scrolls. So those are all scrolls that they really want to see in the setup. The next thing that's really important is how much cult competition is there going to be. If you're Swarmlings and you're playing against cultists, Orin, and chaos magicians, all of a sudden you have to be a little concerned because you're probably not going to do well on network. And if you have huge cult competition, all of a sudden it's a little bit unclear where your points are going to come from. So like cultists in particular are just such a pain. They start dominating the cults. And if you don't have good scoring scrolls in the game, it's hard to figure out what to do as Swarmlings. Often they kind of find a way anyway. They can increase digs. They can dig out a 3rd town. They can, find a way to score, take all the scoring favors, etc. But those would be the main things that I would look for in thinking about how good Swarmlings are. I think another thing you could consider is there like town scoring round 2, and can Swarmlings hit that and get the 2 key town? That can really like explode them because they get the 3 workers back when they town. That will help them dominate cults, and all of a sudden, the whole machine, Swarmlings machine, is rolling. The last thing I'll say is, we already mentioned this, but like, is it a game where I can get 3 towns as opposed to 2 towns? That's a nice swing factor for Swarmlings. When you're ready to start mixing it up with Swarmlings, couple ideas. You can try dwelling rushing, for example, off of Temp Ship, potentially even in the Double West starting place, or semi-dwelling rush, where you do trading post in new dwellings, and then you stronghold on that trading post in round 2. Another idea is to, and I see Hephaestus do this a lot, who's another top player, open Stronghold Temple, and then with the Temple take Earth 2. Those tend to be really fun games. Can go a lot of different directions with that, and one option is that to actually try to increase digging and dig a lot in round 4. Another idea is, if it's a different kind of scoring track with like late dwelling rounds, try playing network Swarmlings, where you are going to try to compete on network and build out and see if you can get to 15 structures and connect. That's out of style right now, but I suspect that it's going to come back more into style in the near future. All right, good luck.